Yeah, man, I'm excited. I'm sitting down with Carl Ladd. Carl Ladd directs BGR, Bethel Global Response. So BGR is doing stuff in like many different corners of the world. I mean, I'll let you talk about who BGR is and what you guys do. Um,
Thanks.
so maybe start there. Good to see you, bro. Glad you're with us.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's an honor to be with you. Thanks for the invite. Um, yeah, like you said, I have the privilege of running Bethel Global Response, BGR. So BGR is a ministry of Bethel Church, really with the heart to see the kingdom of God in the midst of crisis. And
Okay.
what is it to respond, revive, and restore to communities while they're in crisis? We know Jesus is there, he's active. And the church is always active and always wanting to serve. And really our heart is how do we come around and support the local church to be those responders to their own community. We see amazing things happen in the midst of devastation, in the midst of crisis or conflict or natural disaster. Really, they're moments for the church to arise and shine, and see Jesus kind of invade these dark moments. Jesus is there and he's present, and so it's a huge honor to be able to be in my role, to be able to witness that and really see God do miraculous things in the midst of darkness. It's fun.
Yeah, and you guys, so like typical sort of
Uh-oh,
setting.
did I lose you, Lance?
Oh man, I can see you. Am I frozen? There we go. It looks like the internet is being funny
Okay,
on us right
no,
now.
you're back now. I might.
I had you throughout there, so it sounds like you lost
Yep,
me. Um,
the joy of good internet.
yeah, that's right. We need better internet, I guess. Um, but some of the settings that you guys are showing up in, like it's a range. Like you mentioned natural disasters, you mentioned conflict. So you'll show up if there's a big earthquake, a big tornado, a typhoon. But you're also right now, you guys are also active in that kind of Ukraine, Russian landscape. There's obviously this huge reality of war happening. That's why we're bringing you in, is we're trying to unpack this idea of world conflict, and not just from like a theoretical viewpoint, but talk to people that are on the ground in different settings where world conflict is happening. So let's talk specifically about what you guys have been doing out in Ukraine, and go for it. Like whatever you want to share.
Yeah, thanks, Lance. Yeah, we've been working in Ukraine since February 28th is when we first landed over there. We've had long-term missionaries in Ukraine for many years, and so really that's what kind of got BGR engaged so early, is knowing, okay, we have people on the ground, they have their church to care for, their family to care for. How can we go and make sure first off that they're covered, and really just saw God open door after door for us to have a significant impact to people that had severe need. And so through partnership, especially with Mercy Chefs and Joyce Meyer Ministries and many other organizations, we've been able to provide over 2 million pounds of food into some of the most hardest to reach corners of Ukraine.
Wow.
And really our target has always been, where's the need the greatest and where is it not getting met.
Okay.
And through the local church is the grassroots solution. They're in every community and know everybody everywhere. And so through the network and relationship that our missionaries had built, we've been able to push that food out through the local church into areas that otherwise aren't reachable. We were in cities, it was the Red Cross, the United Nations would say, no, that city's impossible to get aid into right now.
Wow.
The local church was there serving, and so we got aid to that local church, and they distributed it door to door 2 weeks before those larger organizations were able to get access.
Yeah.
And just last week, I was with a church on a frontline village. So these are villages in contested territory. So they're in the midst of active conflict, active war.
Wow.
And a church was trying to get food in. This was right on the, and it's in a village that had been occupied by Russia for over 2 months. So it was really close to the beginning of the war that this village got occupied, and they hadn't had any aid, any food supplies come in for that entire time.
Okay.
So we went in with the local church and distributed about 7,000 pounds of food in the midst of shelling, in the midst of chaos. And then we evacuated a few dozen people. And then the next day, the local government said, hey, this village is impossible to get to. There's people that need to be evacuated and they can't be evacuated.
Wow.
And that church went back and evacuated 200 more people from that village the following day. But where government or where larger organizations see impossibilities, the local church knows the God that makes a way where there is no way. And so it's been fun just
Wow.
to be able to partner with the local church and these men, especially that, almost all of them, everyone I worked with, they had wives, they had children, they got them out to safety, and they go back in to serve their communities. I can't tell you how many pastors I had the honor of sitting down with and hearing their story, but seeing what they're doing for their communities and for the communities around them, just putting their life on the line for people to get practical, get their practical needs met. But it's just an incredible open opportunity to share, not just speak the gospel, but to demonstrate the gospel. These people are pretty incredible. These men that just constantly put themselves in the path of danger to serve somebody that they don't even know. It's been humbling to be able to run with them for 2 months. So that's our focus right now, is getting primarily food, but also some hygiene products and things like that. To these kind of contested territories, these contested villages. And so we're active on almost the whole front through the local church. We've got a lot of drivers that basically are just driving these vans into these villages that are in the midst of it, and seeing Jesus get his full reward in the midst of chaos.
Yeah, and it sounds like you guys are more nimble as the church than maybe some larger humanitarian aid organizations can be.
Yeah.
And maybe that's also in their proximity to the government. So you guys, obviously you guys have blessing to be there, but you're not a small outfit. I was just about to say you're small enough to where you can move, but you're dropping 2 million pounds of food. So it's obviously a big operation.
It's a huge operation, but it's through the grassroots structure of the local church, and so these communities, it's not us figuring out, okay, how do we get to those communities? It's, oh, there's a church in that community that already knows all their neighbors. They already have a building and a relational context and network in their community. And they're already there. And oftentimes the pastors are coming, finding ways to get out of these villages. And then they're just looking for, hey, how can I bring resources back to my community? And so we're just kind of funneling those resources to the local church. And empowering them to do what they're wanting to do or already doing. In many cases, the local church was already doing some form of relief. They just couldn't do it to the capacity that they needed to, or they were able to do one van, but they needed to do a van every week of food. And so really being able to leverage resources from other larger organizations or churches from outside Ukraine directly to the local church has really been our strategy. And seeing it just be far more efficient for meeting that immediate need, but then it's already got community and relationship built into it, so that it's not just a single point of distribution, but we're helping build back community. And
What's your insight on the church out there? Like, what are you learning about how the church functions? And maybe there's things that those of us in the West can really glean, not to like throw us under the bus, like we're terrible at doing church. I'm not saying that, but there's probably some stuff that we can learn from. It sounds like there's some stuff we can learn from the way they're operating. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, the church, I've been amazed by the church, not just in Ukraine, but in Europe. I mean, it's pretty fascinating. There's actually studies going on right now about it, because typically when we see this large of a people movement,
Yeah.
I mean, the millions of people that we're seeing move and be displaced, typically we would see large refugee centers and camps kind of pop up that are managed by the UNHCR. And you see mass congregant sheltering. We're seeing very little displaced Ukrainians are actually being housed in churches and individuals. And so it's pretty fascinating. Uh-oh, I'm getting a notice about my internet. You still there?
Yes. Keep
All
going.
right.
I can hear you. I can hear you. I can see you. Just keep going.
Excellent. Well, it's fascinating to see the local church. And I mean, obviously there's others that are doing it. There's businesses. I met a businessman who had a furniture business, and this is in Romania. And so
Okay.
he had about 30 beds on his showroom floor with nightstands and furniture. Like, so they have like little rooms set up as display. He closed his business and turned it into a refugee center and
Wow.
housed about 70 women and children, Ukrainian women and children.
Wow.
He's been doing this for 2 months. And I talked to him, I was like, man, how's your business going to survive? Like, he closed his business. So his showroom is now a refugee center. So he has no way to sell, continue his business, but also all of his inventory that he had is now used. It's now, he no longer can sell it. And so I'm like, how are you staying afloat? How is your business going to survive this? It's been 2 months. And his response was, Carl, I'm not concerned about my business surviving. I'm concerned about their survival right now. And so, like, I mean, that's one example of just individuals, but so there's businesses, there's governments are doing incredible work, but a huge portion of it is the local church, and individual families that have opened up their homes. This is in Moldova, Romania, Poland, Germany. I mean, the list goes on and on. Western Ukraine, as it's somewhat stabilized, and kind of the battle lines have been more condensed to the east and south of Ukraine. We see countless homes that have opened their door and invited families in for months on end now. It's pretty fascinating to see the church's response to this globally, and then to these individual communities. But the other thing, I was sitting in Kharkiv, and I was talking with a pastor of one of the larger churches there, and he was telling me the day before he was having tea with two of the Orthodox priests, and they were joking, and they said, wow, who would have known it would take a war to get us to have tea together? And because their churches are starting to work together to house people in Kharkiv and feed people and help their community recover from this, and kind of weather this storm, as Kharkiv is still getting hit often. So it's amazing to see some of the unity that comes out of this, and the need for the
Yeah.
church to be united.
Yeah.
That was a Pentecostal pastor and Orthodox priest,
Yeah.
realizing, oh, we have way more in common than we
Yeah.
have that separates us.
Yeah.
And I think the united church is a beautiful thing that we rarely get to see, and it is a bummer that it takes war, it takes a massive land invasion, to sometimes produce that. And so I think if we can learn from that, without the war side of it, we'd be quite a bit ahead.
Well, I
to
mean,
really-
interesting, because I mean, ultimately, we're trying to talk about this problem of world conflict. And then at the
Yeah.
end of the day, really what we're talking about are people being in conflict. So
Yeah.
if the result of world conflict is the church being less at odds with each other and more together, and even the thought of the generosity of the church like, I think when there's displaced people groups, the normal conversation is like, hey, they're going to take away our resources, not,
Yep.
hey, let's open our homes. And so you're saying, you're talking about a lot of entities, business owners, the government, but you're saying, hey, the church has done kind of tip of the spear to
Yep.
open their homes and let the masses flood in. Again, that doesn't feel like a normal human response. That sounds like something miraculous, because
Yeah.
I don't know, we see a lot of displaced people groups all over the
Yep.
world. So yeah, if people are coming together, wow, that's something beautiful. Anything that you can share with us? And it sounds like you were just there like a week ago. So this isn't like months. These aren't stories from back in February. Like, you've just gotten back from Ukraine.
Yeah. I got back, I think it was 4 days ago I got back. So
Yeah, and just for those that don't know, like, the conflict is still raging. Like, it's not as
yep.
in the news cycles, but it's still very much a prevalent reality.
Yep.
Conflict is happening, people are dying. You're
Yep.
you're talking about being in a village where there's active shelling going on, and you're literally evacuating people.
Yep.
Um, in addition to what you've already shared, is there anything you'd like to add in terms of what you're seeing at the ground level, like the way people are affected by war? Because we
Yeah.
can do a good job talking 50,000 foot view and political dynamics and leaders
Yep.
of countries, and yet the reality is, like, what is actually happening to normal people that live in that area?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's
Well,
tragic.
you're bringing food, so they're on the verge of starving. So that's one thing. People are
Yep.
going hungry. What else are you seeing about
Yep.
how this actually affects the people that live there?
Yeah. I mean, it's affecting every element of their lives. I mean,
Mhm.
we evacuated, this was a little over a month ago. This was quite a while ago, but we evacuated a family of four. They had a 6-year-old son. And we're evacuating them from the east to Western Ukraine, where it's a little
Okay.
bit more safe. So it's about a 2 day and a half journey. So when we evacuate them, this one was just northeast of Kharkiv that we were evacuating them out of. They had been under occupation for 3 weeks,
Yep.
and we evacuated them and brought them to an overnight kind of transient shelter in central Ukraine before. And so we arrived about 4 in the afternoon, kind of. So it wasn't quite mealtime. But when we arrived, they had some biscuits, and so they just gave everybody biscuits to kind of tide them over to dinner. The 6-year-old boy was just nibbling this thing, like just barely eating it, just savoring it.
Mm,
And one of our drivers, legend of a man named Tolik, he's I can't tell you how many people he's evacuated. I mean,
wow.
he he evacuated this family, and then ever since then, every day he's driving
Wow.
to some of the hottest villages, hottest zones, um, and bringing food in and people out. But Tolik asked the mom, he's like, what's the deal? Why is your son eating that way? And she turned, and she was just tears streaming down her face. She said he hasn't had anything to eat in 3 weeks. He doesn't understand that there's more food. Like, he doesn't understand that there's a meal coming after this. He
Oh my
thinks
gosh.
that's all he's gonna eat. And so totally the next day took him to the gas station. It's just like, buy whatever you want, take whatever food you want, candy bars. But it's these kids, there's kids in the midst of this, there's families in the midst of this that are experiencing things that we can't even think of, of hunger, of pain, of watching their loved ones die, of
Mm,
I visited bomb shelters where
mm,
people are living underground for months. They've been under there for months. Some of them have given up on the bomb shelter and said, I'd rather die, take the risk of dying than live underground anymore.
wow.
And some are staying down there. And so you're seeing, there's all the immediate effects that you think of, lack of water, lack of food, lack of shelter. But then you start to talk to them and you see the long-term impacts of kids been out of school now for, almost 2.5 months.
Yeah.
Families have been separated. So even in parts of Ukraine that aren't, under active shelling and living underground and having no food, there's still almost the mass majority of families are separated. So you have dads that, haven't seen their kids in 2 months. I've spent, out of the last 2 months, I've only been home not even 3 weeks. And I feel like, man, I can't, like, my kids, like I'm seeing when I come home, I see the difference in how my kids are treating their mom, or how they're listening to me or their mom, or how they're dealing with basic emotional things that my privileged American family, deals with. And I can't imagine what these families that are not just separated, but separated in the midst of trauma,
Yeah.
the long-term effects of that. War is brutal. War is so much more devastating than you can imagine unless you've experienced it. It's one thing to talk about shelling. It's another thing to actively, be under shelling, and your house to your bomb shelter, whatever you're in is shaking, and you make it through, but then you go out and your neighbors didn't, and you're living with that day in and day out. You're dealing wars. It's a tricky thing because you're seeing the most desperate, the depravity of man. You're seeing the worst of man, some just terrible stories and that are coming out of the atrocities that are happening. We also evacuated another family northeast of Kharkiv, and we asked them, how'd you guys get out? Because they walked out of occupied territory. They had been under that for about a month and a half, and they said we finally just decided to risk it, because there'd been stories and there's reports of just kind of indiscriminate shooting of civilians as they're walking, and this family with young ones decided we got to risk it. And so they actually walked out, and a Russian vehicle, with the Z on it, so they knew from afar that this is a Russian vehicle, came up on them. And they, in their heads, they're thinking, this is it. We got caught. They're gonna shoot us, because that's what the stories that they had personal friends that happened to. They shot them. Car pulled over next to them, Russian soldiers, and they gave them a couple candy bars and drove off. So you see just the worst of man, and then you see this beautiful generosity, some of the best of humankind in the midst of it. I think the danger is when you're not in the midst of it, you start to you want to look at the political side of it. You want to when I get home, people ask me, so what's really going on? Like, what's really, like, is Ukraine really good, or is Russia really doing this stuff, or what do you think about NATO? And like, they want to talk about these 30,000 foot elevation. I'm like, whoa. Like, before we can have those conversations, let me tell you about Tolik. Let me tell you about Dima. Let me tell you about these people that are in the midst of this. And let me tell you, when a bomb is coming down on you, when the plane's flying over and you're seeing bombs drop out of it and anti-aircraft's trying to shoot it down, my first thought isn't, is that Russia? Is that Ukraine? Is that NATO? What is that? My first thought is, oh, we need to kind of find some shelter. and who's next to me? Who's around me? Are they America? Well, none of them were American, but are they Ukrainians? Are they Russian? Are they Romanian? Are they Moldovan? I'm not concerned about that. It's who's around me. How do we all get safe? And conflicts, whether it be a political worldwide war like we're looking at in, or not worldwide, but a geopolitical battle between Russia and Ukraine, or whether it be an individual conflict with your neighbor. Conflict in order to justify your side, you have, like, it wants to villainize the other side, and it wants to
Wow.
remove the humanity and just look at the problem.
Wow.
Like, that's conflict's desire, is remove the humanity and only see the problem.
Wow.
And that's where we start going to blows.
Yeah.
And I think we have to be so careful to remember to not remove the humanity.
That's
We have an
great.
ongoing project that we've been going for almost a year down in Tijuana with our migrants at the southern border. And it's another very politically charged thing. And there's complex political problems and solutions, but in the midst of it, there's humanity. Like, there is individual people, individual women, children, men that are in the midst of crisis and have real need. And if we're so concerned about the conflict and the problem and figuring out what side we need to be on, or what the solution is, and we lose sight of the humanity in it, I don't think we're going to be part of the solution. I think we're just going to be part of the prolonging of that problem. And
Yeah.
so we have to look at the humanity. Jesus was so good at that, of looking at the people in front of him, and taking time for the individuals. And yeah.
Excellent. I love it, man. Those are such great thoughts. Really powerful. So with that said, and again, I so appreciate you sharing the stories, because there's so many of us that we don't hear that level of detail. We're not aware of the things that real people are actually navigating right now. And we are prone to more just talk about the political dynamics and who's right and who's wrong. So these stories to me are very transformational, very powerful, keeping the heart stuff first. I love the story, though, that the church is really at the forefront with generosity and with courage, like bringing resources and getting people out of unsafe situations. It's so inspiring. I mean, if we could have that mentality, that sort of generosity, because in our own context, we have some of those crises. Like, I think of like the foster care epidemic. There are just tons of kids that don't have a place to go. But generally speaking, we're more concerned about how's that going to affect me, less more like how can we be generous. I would love to hear, though, like, what are your thoughts politically? I mean, I know you just had a beautiful conversation about like that's not important. But do you have any thoughts about war and conflict? And I don't know if it's like, hey, Russia's right, Russia's wrong, Ukraine's right, Ukraine's wrong, but like just even your view on war in general. Is there anything that you'd like to share there? I mean, you're pretty close to it right now. Like, you're seeing things that maybe not a lot of us have encountered. Maybe you're being changed or impacted. What's the kind of mark being left on your life as you've been in these situations, walking with these people?
It's a good question.
I mean, you're probably in the middle of it, and I would assume it's a shell shock of its own, coming back to such safety, privilege, stability. There's probably an element of like culture shock that you're navigating right now. Like
a bit. I mean, always, just living in extremes, I guess. A war is, it's always more complicated than it actually is, like, than it seems, right? You can try to boil it down to what the real cause is, or everybody can and wants to, and justify their side of it, right? So like there's people that can justify the Russian side of it, and there's a lot of people that justify the Ukrainian side of it, and more as the defenders, since Russia's the aggressor here, invading. But so there's always, I mean, if somebody couldn't defend their own side, then they probably wouldn't be doing it. So there's always ways of justifying their own side. But the hard part is it's the people that cause war are very rarely the ones that actually pay the cost for war.
Wow.
Um, and so I think that's the tragic thing of it, is there's so much innocence lost in war. I mean,
Wow.
it's innocent people that,
Mm,
for the most part, that are being effective and causing the effect as
yeah.
well. So it's you it's tragic on both ends. Like to
Yeah.
think of, some of these soldiers that are being thrusted into this, um, when it wasn't their fight, it wasn't their
Yeah.
opinion. And so war, you know, war is disgusting. Like,
Yeah.
war is it's brutal, it's sad, it causes you to not just lose sight of humanity, but I think you lose a large piece of your humanity when you're
Wow.
participating in war.
Wow.
um
That's big.
and I just, we got to find another way.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds cliche, or whatever, but like, war is not an answer. Like, war is
Yeah.
not a solution. And I don't know. I've worked in war zones or conflict zones a fair bit in the past, and uh, it's just, yeah. I mean, you look at a situation, or like, I think of, you know, I can't imagine being a leader that has to make decisions about war or not war,
Wow.
to invade a country or not invade a country, or to, how to support, our country. How do we support Ukraine in the midst of this? And like, I can't imagine making those decisions and figuring out where we need to stand on a war. The luxury of my role, of my position, is, sorry, um, I have the luxury of getting to not get involved in kind of those decision processing, or
Sure.
figuring out where I stand. I have the luxury of knowing there's real people that are caught in the middle of this, with real need. Um, and I had to dedicate my time and efforts to serving those needs, to
Yeah.
serving those people. Um, and in the midst of that, in the midst of these contested, villages where literally I'm in between Ukraine and Russia, you get to see the best of humanity.
Yeah.
We get to see people, that are enduring, that are, with everything stacked against them, they're still there. They're still find a way to have a smile on their face. It's find a way to still be hospitable to me coming in. Like, it's just, uh, the people that are in the midst of this are beautiful people.
Yeah.
And it's tragic that, for whatever reasons or whatever disagreements on larger levels, these people get to experience the brunt of those poor
Yeah.
decisions.
Yeah.
And that's a huge added element here, is almost every Ukrainian I talk to, when I talk to them about that, like, what do you think? Like, what do you think this is about? Or like,
Mm,
what's going on? They think, oh no, it's two big brothers fighting, and we're caught in the middle of it. They think it has
wow.
more to do with NATO and the US and Russia trying to figure out, and them, and
Okay.
Ukraine is just a pawn.
Yeah.
Um, so I can't imagine how that feels as a Ukrainian, knowing, yeah, our country is getting torn to bits. My family's dying
Yeah.
because these two big brothers have to figure something out.
Yeah.
Um, it's an added part of the trauma.
Yeah. Yeah. That's big. Well, it's really good hearing your thoughts, man. I like just such a privilege to be able to talk to somebody so close to the issue right now. And thanks again for sharing the stories of the people on the ground. And yeah, I think your thoughts are very insightful on the whole landscape itself and the reality of conflict. I'm learning a lot listening to you. So I appreciate you taking time with us. I don't know if there's anything else on your mind that I haven't asked you about that you would like to share. There's definitely space and time. Anything else on your mind as we are getting ready to land this and wrap it up?
Thanks, Lance. And Yeah, I mean, a lot of my opinions I'm definitely formulating, so it's kind of
Yeah,
like verbally processing with you, so it's
yeah,
been it's fun. Like, I appreciate the opportunity. It's yeah, to be honest, I mean, there's so much of it that I'm still figuring out myself, and even having these conversations with people that are really close to me as well.
yeah,
Like, um there's a lot of, everybody has an opinion, and
yeah,
the hard part is there's so much opinion, and especially, in today's world of social media and news outlets and information. I mean,
mm,
you can get whatever information you want, like,
mm,
and oftentimes, the information you search, that's the information you find. And so I think it can
yeah,
be really, really hard, um to actually figure out what is actually going on, what is the actual impact on the ground.
yeah,
Or and so I think it's so important for us to not jump to conclusions, or not to um look for ways of justifying where we stand.
yeah.
um but I think really trying to be sensitive, and look, again, putting the humanity back into it,
I
and
love that.
really looking for, oh, how's this affecting individuals, like,
Yeah,
rather than, oh, what's the main effector. I think if we looked at what's the effect, and starting there, rather than trying to start at what's causing this, which
yeah,
sounds different. I mean, normally we look at problems like, okay, don't deal with the surface issues, we got to go to the root issues, right? but
sure.
but but I think when we're dealing with um human impact here, I think oftentimes that the humanity of it, we want to jump to the root, that we kind of undercut the humanity of it. And so taking it all, yes, we got to address root issues. um I think maybe when it comes with complex situations like this, we can't go there unless we understand what's the effect first.
Yeah,
And so
that's good.
um yeah, so it's kind of where I'm at now. It might change with my next trip to Ukraine, but or down to the border, or whatever the next conflict I find myself in. But
Yeah,
um, I think with conflicts, we have to look for connection. We have to look for, like I was talking about those pastors and priests. Like,
yeah,
there's actually more that brings us together than separates us.
good.
And so looking at those things and trying to, yeah, see it through both, a different lens, I guess, but
That's
sometimes can
good.
be challenging.
What if people want to contribute in any way to what you guys are up to? Is there a way that people would find you?
Yeah, we have a website, bethelglobalresponse.com.
Okay.
As well, we're on social media, Facebook,
Yeah,
and the other one. I don't do any social media. That's not, my team does it, but
that's great.
um, yeah, Instagram, that's it. So
BethelGlobalResponse.com.
bethelglobalresponse.com. Yep,
Good.
that'll get you to our website, and all of our links are on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then our primary partner in this, especially with the food, is Mercy Chefs. So
Okay.
mercychefs.org. But yeah, we're privileged and honored to be running with the church. We're partnered with the church in Romania and Ukraine, and the church is strong. The church is doing incredible work, and representing the best of man and the best of God in the midst of crisis. So
I love
super
it.
proud to be part of the global church.
And I love the dynamic there of like that organic network. Like there's this fluid, nimble, very active network that the church has facilitated and fostered. And it sounds to me
Yeah,
like if you didn't have those churches led by pastors that really care about their people, care about the cities they live in, you wouldn't have the
yeah,
kind of ability to get resources in and out so quickly. Um, yeah,
yeah,
what a great story. It's just such a testimony, and it
yeah,
definitely hopefully inspires us in our Western context to be more networked and more fluid. And, you know, seeing like the church at large instead of just our individual church,
Yeah.
right?
No, that's good, Lance. And that's one thing every pastor I talked with said, Carl, it feels like it's the early 90s. Like it feels like right after the fall of communism, people are just flooding to the church.
Wow.
Almost every church, because of this people movement. We were in a church last Sunday. We were speaking in a church, and the church was full. Like the room was full. There's hardly empty chairs. And the pastor says, yeah, 4 of these people that are here were in my church before the war. And almost all of his church had evacuated. So his church got empty, and then it filled up with new people that are rushing to Jesus.
Wow.
And so we are seeing the, revival happening in Ukraine. And in the midst of tragedy, in the midst of hardship, people run to the church. And if the church isn't ready, if the church doesn't have their doors open, we're going to miss it.
Yeah.
And but the church is the solution. The church, almost like Jesus knew what he was doing when he designed it. But it's this beautiful grassroots thing that is not just a building, not just individuals, but it's a network, it's a community within a community.
Yeah.
And that's so important for the church. Like these pastors are effective right now, not because they were close to the people that were in their church.
Yeah.
The ones that are effective, the ones that were actually making a significant impact on their communities, they were tied in with their communities, their community, not just their church, but their whole neighborhood, their city, their village, whatever it is, before the event. They knew who the equivalent mayor was. They knew what other groups that were doing social work in their community. And so the church became a leader in this time, but they were already in connection. They were already in relationship with the community outside of their walls.
Nice.
So I think it's so important for the church. If we're not active in peacetime, it's going to be really hard for us to be active when our community needs us the most.
Yeah, I love it. Great thoughts, Carl. Thanks for what you're doing. Thanks for giving us time. Really super privileged to be able to hear these stories. And I hope these moments don't just add to the noise, but they inspire people to kind of think about things the way you're encouraging us to think about, which is like keeping people at the center. I love it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to say goodbye. Carl, thanks for your time. Bless you. And
of course, bless you. Thank you for the time. Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. And we'll see the rest of you soon. God bless you. Peace. We're out.
Thanks, Lance.